Welcome everyone. Kicking off our March 2024 adoption user group. Welcome all in your chat. You'll actually find, and I do have it pinned in there in chat, the presentation for today on the bit.ly link. It will go live up on the YouTube channel when I've actually put it up there. So give me a little bit, I'll get it organized and then I'll put it up. Generally what I'll do is I'll do a post back into the group here. I put it on our meetup page. I posted up on LinkedIn and Twitter and a variety of places. So you should be able to find it wherever it is you tend to live the most. So of course, we try and make sure it's the first Tuesday of every month unless something actually happens. So here we are, 12 o'clock. I am going to try very hard to make sure that we stick to an hour and a half with I have a bit of a hard stop today, but I know there's so much content. So there'll be pages in here that I might actually skip through, and you can come back and always have a look at it yourself. So the presentation is there and available for you. So welcome one and all. Now I get ourselves started and get in. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we're meeting from today. And I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders that are with us today. I do ask that as we work our way through the presentation, at any point you can go in and you can type into chat any questions that you have, both either for myself or our guest speaker, Adam, who has very kindly come along today. We are always very welcoming to all viewpoints and questions, but I do ask that you be understanding of our differences, you be kind, respectful and considerate of others, and that we use appropriate GIFs and text as we're typing out our questions and opinions. Okay, my name is Kirsty McGrath. If you haven't actually been on this session before, there was an awful lot of new attendees that had actually signed up both across Sydney and Melbourne this month. I know that Copilot is a bit of a hot topic. So if you're not familiar with me, I am an adoption and employee experience consultant with On Point Solutions. I run the adoption user groups for Australia and I have been doing it. We're in our 8th year. So let's get underway. My details are there. What have I been up to? I always start with a bit of what I've been up to. I went and did an acrylic painting class. It was a bit of a first. Had to do some hydrangeas. It's like, nice. My whole house is hydrangeas, so that works. And had a bit of a fun. I've just finished off a puzzle. As you know, I like to do that for mindfulness. We tend to have very stressful environment. Any guess on a picture of what city that is? Throw it into chat. It was my identical twins' 25th birthday. I know, right? So we had a bit of a fun with them. They don't like cakes. Cake decorator, don't like cakes. I did a big pavlova for them. I do a lot of those. I won't post photos of that. We had the AI tour, the Microsoft AI2. Fabulous. Got to see. So Tokyo, yes, Wimbledon, you've got it. So we had our tour, some great connections. It was so good to be back in and networking. It's been so long since we've managed to do that. And that was where I got to have a chat with Adam. So I really look forward to Adam presenting today. I have had to make this little bunny and I've had to make him look like an actual teddy bear bunny that for a little boy who's just turning 5. So he's looking a little manky and a little, but here's the exact replica of this little bunny. So very cute, my cake decorating. But my big news is my daughter got engaged last week. She asked her partner on the 29th of February, Bachelor's Day, which is an old Irish tradition of being able to ask your partner. So I'm looking forward to having a wedding in the family. So it's all very exciting. Yes, wedding cake, I know. But my other exciting news is this weekend I am off to the Microsoft MVP Summit over in Redmond. So I'm really looking forward to going over there. Of course, we're under NDA, so we can't actually talk about a lot of what we're learning. But the good part is when things come up as we go through on our what's new and what's coming, it means I can actually really kind of dive into it for you because I'll have that background knowledge as we do. I mean, we continue on every month with our meetings with the product managers, but it's a good chance for us to look at, what's coming down the line over the coming years and pull it apart and give it some direction to ensure that it's actually going to be relevant for you. Okay. Now let's pass on our guest speaker. So I'm very thankful that Adam has come in. Adam and I met at the AI tour when we were discussing Copilot, and he got very involved in that, early program, the access program around Copilot, and has a lot of learnings of which we're going to very much focus on, that end user adoption, the training, the challenges, what was actually going on for business across this particular space. It's a bit of a fireside chat. He is not going to kill us with death by PowerPoint. This is a very much a two-way conversation with you guys. So please feel free to put your messages into chat, your questions, whatever it is that you want to ask. So let's open up and let's start now with Adam.
Thanks, Kirsty, and great to be here today. And yeah, look, there's been quite the journey over the last 9 months that I've been working with M365 Copilot, leading the charge with the Australian customers that had signed up to the early access program. So what that was is the private preview before we went GA. And learning on the fly is probably the best way to describe it. It was certainly the most like working in partner land, where you've won a bit of business and you're now having to deliver that. And so, Kirsty, I'm sure you can relate to that. And I'm actually part of what's called Corp at Microsoft, which is the the field is in each of the regions, and I'm part of Corp. So it was amazing to actually see just how the Microsoft machine works. So that was kind of one of the things I got from this. But for you, what I want to share is just a little bit of what had happened in that journey, where we got to, and would love to hear from the group here where you're at in your journey. What's stopping you at the moment from going with Copilot? Where's your organization at? And how might I be able to help on this call? Because, coming from customer land, coming from partner land, and coming from a CSM for modern work background, no surprises here that change management is the key to success.
Yes.
And we will talk about that in a minute.
That's it. So, James, we've turned off the screen sharing. It's because it's going to be a bit of a fireside chat. There might be a slide that we'll put up at some point in regards to bringing it all together as a journey. Yeah. But this is very much a, Q&A and giving you the lessons learned. So if you've got questions, James, I know you'll have questions. If you've got questions, put your questions into chat. So let's kick off at first. So, when it came to, what was the biggest challenge? Like if you had to list out, maybe you got your top 5 challenges. What was number 1, Adam, when it came to kicking off with Copilot?
Interestingly enough, it was probably the disruption to the end users from moving to current channel and moving to the new Outlook. So before we'd even got to using Copilot, that was some of the resistance.
So that changeover in the technologies that they needed to have, the new teams, the new Outlook to get them on the Copilot journey.
Absolutely. And enabling transcription for some organizations where we knew transcription is required for Copilot to be able to do its magic. But a lot of organizations weren't enabling that for different reasons. And so getting them to even just enable the underlying technology was one of the biggest blockers. But if I was to take all of, let's call the technology constraints, the governance compliance, SOC compliance, and all that out of the picture, the biggest challenge for our users is, and I know no one on this call will be surprised, it was a new way of working. Learning how do you work with moving from deterministic, if then, yes, no, to probabilistic, maybe, and how to be able to write a good prompt. How do you actually get the most out of it? And also, how do you take the organizations on that journey so that your people were coming with you, whereas a lot of the times it was the technology was leading it, but the people were kind of being left behind.
Yeah. Do you think it'll make a difference with Copilot coming into Outlook Classic? I know that that's, slated to come in soon. Do you think that will help the organizations get past, some of those challenges? I know that, we've got the end user and building it into practices, but that technology piece is a really big component, when people have been using Classic Outlook for a really long time. And we know that the new Outlook is still, we might say it half-baked, because it's still in its sort of the preview sort of beta process with lots of teachers still to come. So I can imagine, yes, that would be a challenge.
Yeah. Look, I definitely think for a lot of the organizations that had not just the functionality that was missing, that's one part of it, but also just from my own experience, moving to new Outlook was such a radically different experience that we had really high user resistance that we needed to manage. Now, once people get over that curve, I haven't gone back, even though I can run them both hybrid. But bearing in mind, a lot of legacy workflows and things like that were being impacted, or third-party plugins. So, but the biggest takeaway, especially for this group, is we're not changing our direction. Microsoft will still be going with new Outlook. It's just that we're bringing these capabilities in to buy time while the feature function catch up on the new PWA version on Monarch.
Yep. Yeah, it seems to be that, and I'm not sure, is it Warburton? I know it's got CJ afterwards, so your name might start with, you might be CJ, but it's that having users remember to use it and build it into work practices. How did you help them on that journey?
Yeah. Look, you've nailed it on the head. Is multiple things need to happen together. One is, as an adoption and change function, establishing a safe place that's fun, that's collaborative for people to feel like they can experiment and learn, and then share that back in so people are learning on top of that. So that was key. 2, helping people to go from this kind of, oh, it didn't work, fail, I'm never using it again, to having more of an experimentation, feedback, comeback mindset to this. So I tried, it didn't work. There can be so many other reasons it didn't work at that point in time. Was it the technology? Was the underlying technology enabled? Was it a you problem? And I always assume I'm the problem in the chair. So,
but not everyone does, as we know. Hence why we got a lot of change managers on that journey. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the art of the possible sessions, when I'm doing it, I would do it live. People would see the challenges that hopefully I can actually replicate, to show hallucinations, to show technical issues and how you can overcome them, to also understand that the different parts of the technology were at different levels of their journey. We've talked about new Outlook. We know Excel was a fast follow, and PowerPoint isn't where our users wanted it to be in terms of, let's call it, more autopilot. And so you needed to be more iterative with that, rather than with Teams, which was, for example, with meetings, was pretty much out of the box, worked pretty well to capture meetings and actions. So understanding the nuances, understanding that in different interfaces, you will interface with it differently. So, for example, I can browse for a file on Word Online in my OneDrive or like cloud storage, SharePoint, whatever. But I couldn't do that in PowerPoint. I had to use the URL. And so there was all these different kind of technology quirks that were inhibiting people. But ultimately, I'm going to keep going back to the same theme. How do you take the users on the journey? And I've kind of brought an analogy of introducing a kitten to a home, one room at a time. Take people through the hero scenarios that we know work well, such as meeting transcriptions, like end-to-end meeting life cycle. How do you then layer that once they've got their head around that, seeing how that can have such a positive impact on outcomes, and then build on top of that? But also what that did was mitigated a lot of the hype cycle that was happening with AI, where, users would have an issue. They may not even report it, especially like more senior people would have had that in the past, and they'd fall off and they'd give up. And so how do you actually show them some value so that they keep trying? They keep
So you're talking about
wanting to learn.
needing that kind of reporting process of something didn't work and how could you potentially iterate? Like, did you set up things like, did you have Teams channels or Viva Engage groups, or what did you set up to help them? I mean, even James has got, can we realistically expect people to have an experimentation mindset? How do we get them on that journey to an experimentation mindset even?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, really good points. And I was working with pretty much 20 of the biggest customers, most of the banks. And so if we could do it there, you can do it anywhere. But not every organization has that mindset. And so we would typically need to get out of IT into partnering with the innovation team that would run the experiments with us. We also, I'll talk about business value and capturing that in a while. But basically what we had out of the box was what we call the COE, or a Center of Excellence, but don't mistake it with the Power Platform Center of Excellence. This was really a community of practice.
Okay.
It was a team site with a SharePoint backend that we provided to accelerate the starting point and lower the effort for the change community, knowing that this was an experiment. It was only limited to 300 users and license-wise. And so they wouldn't have a big change budget for it, or even an adoption person initially allocated. So having those conversations was
Did
a
they
challenge
change
too.
their mind on that, Adam? Did they change their mind on it in that journey?
I can talk to one specific customer where I had that conversation with them. It didn't go down too well, but then they had engaged another third-party partner of ours to actually do that. And at the end of it, they're one of the biggest success stories. So
just goes, I mean, change just makes, we know it makes a huge difference ultimately.
And with this specifically, it's one of the biggest changes people will go on in probably our lifetime from now moving forward technology wise. I can't see us going any other way but using it more and more in terms of our everyday work. And now, Microsoft's opened up the licensing to all different types of businesses. And for small to medium business, amazing.
The biggest change? What do you see it as the biggest change? What is it that makes is it the people challenge? They're just not used to AI. Are they frightened? Is it the technology? Is it the concept? What is it that we can break down for our businesses?
Sure. It's all of the above, basically. So for example, how do you capture, let's call it productivity benefits, when we know that people might be concerned that if they are too candid and they say, 80% of my time is saved, I might lose my job. And so
the fear of I'm out of a job. It always comes back to that with tech, doesn't it?
And
Terminator, it's going to take over the world.
Exactly. And so once we implemented Skynet, we had to look at what do we do next, right? And so look, I think for me, helping to educate users here that were part of this to go, you're actually at the forefront of making yourself more relevant in future. What I mean by that is AI may not take our jobs, but people that can use AI will, right? And so how do you learn to build a muscle in this? What I typically would talk to our user groups with was that think of it as you've got a graduate just joined your team, right? Knows about a lot of things, but doesn't necessarily know your organization, how you work, your language, your domain. And so you're not going to blindly forward something that Copilot generated for you, or CP we'll call it, and without you kind of going back through it, reviewing it, understanding it, making it in your tone, etc., so that it actually could be something you could stand behind. And so when people started to see, I suppose, some of the value, and that's where we took some of the fear out of it, then made it relevant to users. So how do you help them to have that aha moment, connecting the dots between feature function to scenarios and telling a story that will resonate with the users and what they do in a day in the life. And that won't be a surprise to anyone on this call, I suspect. But when we did that and people started to then see the way that it can help in what they do, doing some of that busy work or some of the, creativity benefits. So for example, you got to create there's a new strategy, an annual report, there's a new strategy, right? Or an AI strategy just being published. And you've got to send out a memo to the whole organization about it and make it inspiring and informative, and you're exhausted. And, you know, we know everyone's overworked and too busy. So being able to show how AI can actually add a funny quip in that you.
How did you show it? Were you doing multiple demo lessons? Was it using online learning tools? Was it, you know, webinars?
Sure.
Was it hands-on training? Was it workshopping? What did that look like?
All of the above.
Okay.
But typically it was, you know, lunch and learns. It was reinforcement, like grab a group of, let's say, HR people or legal team and bring them together and then do it from their persona perspective. So I had this learning very early that what the collateral we were getting from Microsoft was very good feature function, but didn't resonate with users. And I had the experience where I presented this to one customer and it fell so flat, it was awkward. And so then I went and took that and turned it into what was relevant as I understood it from having worked in the banks before, and made it more something that they could relate to.
So we make sure we're tailoring our use cases for the different varieties of people within the business as part of demos.
Exactly, as we would, right? Then over time, building out the community of practice, getting the change champions, seeing the innovators, and then using what they were doing, giving them a pedestal, supporting them, giving them advanced learning. Like, so I ran like master classes for them on prompt engineering as a, let's call it a reward for being those innovators. Then, and no surprise to everyone here, you know, strong sponsorship, demonstrating the value, leading the charge, really important, as you would expect, right? And probably the last point I'll make on this, where the execs were given licenses, like our initial guidance was don't give it to execs, right? The hype cycle meant that we didn't have a choice. Yeah. And so working with them, so I went from kind of, let's call it one-to-many sessions around the art of the possible, where I was kind of demoing this, to one-on-one coaching in it for an hour for one of the senior execs, say the CIO or the head of payments or whatever, the head of the chief economist, whatever role it was, to try and relate it back to what they did and help them get over the curve. So sometimes that was with their support team, sometimes that was just one-on-one. And one of the observations was sometimes they didn't even tell their support team they were having problems. They actually just was like, nah. And so definitely key is, you know, as part of your resistance management, understanding where those pockets are, who has licenses that is a risk. And ultimately it comes down to capacity. If you don't give people time to play with this, if they're too busy, we always revert back to what we were. And everyone is an individual user before they are a role, before they are an exec, before they are the chief economist or whatever. And so just giving everyone that level of understanding, knowledge from an AGCAR perspective, support, to be able to then apply it in their role and have the confidence. So, you know, through those sessions, we basically get them to play along at home. And by doing that, we could also understand, where was there any technical issues blocking them? Did they have it set up in all the different applications when it was working okay? And do I now walk away from this session knowing they have the knowledge? We then share the videos with them. Their internal change team would either just upload it as a file and then you could use transcription on it, so using Copilot on it, or we would put it up into videos and make them snackables, you know, whatever way you wanted to do it. But ultimately, it was just about how do we coach them, teach them, show them, support them through that journey.
So would you say that for a lot of the execs, you really need to do that white glove one-on-one on this particular topic?
I think on this specific topic, yes. Certainly, at least the ones that you know are going to be key to scaling. So that might be the CIO, or key to like this being part of the business and they're kind of keen. So how do we give them that extra, let's call it, I don't know, one of the banks, institutional banking, we're really keen to actually have this. So how do you kind of make them the voice of to demonstrate value, because it doesn't matter what Microsoft say and do. It's how does each organization turn that into value that they're seeing and resonates with them to share with their colleagues. And that's really the key, is how do we actually get it from a outside in to internal users espousing it, to then make sure that it lands within that organization and they can then capture that value.
Yeah. So we've had, a couple where in the chat sort of talking about that, data ingestion sort of limited the input output, that, the summaries weren't necessarily working. So there was a bit of a low confidence around it. People reporting spending more time on the output because they didn't actually trust it, for example, and those check engines around ways to be able to work with it. Do you think that that's because the information's not being drawn, or maybe they're new starters, or where it's pointing to, or just time in terms of building out this product and what it actually looks like and what it's returning?
Look, I think it's potentially all of the above. So, for example, when we were early in the product lifecycle, like by the time we got to GA, the capabilities matched the vision, right? But then each organization's environment had nuances. That would mean that potentially semantic searching hadn't been indexed properly, or you might still have data sets on-prem, like SharePoint on-prem, that meant it wasn't connected, or we needed to look at connecting to that. Or you have, you turned off Delve because you knew you had a mess, and now you have a challenge in that you want to enable this, but do it in a way that will allow you to put in the good governance, which precedes strong adoption. So there's lots of different reasons. It's a bit like when I used to ring my mom, say on Skype back in Ireland, and it'd be like there'd be a problem, and my mom would be like, "Oh, this Skype is terrible," and you're like, "Well, actually, we're on the other side of the world, 18,000 kilometers away. There's all these different things in between that could be the problem, but sure, Skype's the problem." So Copilot has the same nuances, because ultimately it sits on top of the technology. So obviously you need to make sure that all that underlying technology in terms of, the applications, the productivity suite, Teams, etc., are set up for Copilot for success. Obviously, then if you are still having problems, or multiple people are having problems, then yes, that should be something we raise as a ticket. And ultimately, though, through the EAP process, quality did improve, productivity did improve, speed improved. But yeah, there's still gaps, right? Excel isn't marrying up to what people use Excel for today. And so for the change team, what's really important is understanding what it can do and which personas that applies to. So for example, with the execs, I'd always create a time-sensitive scenario for them. Talk about, you've got an hour and you need to be able to report on the D&I breakdown for your organization, which you'd normally get an analyst to do, but they're not around. You used to be hands-on before you were a manager, but now you don't know how to do it. So how do you use Copilot to ask it questions of the data to show where it works well, right? Whilst in the background, you can also then be addressing any technical issues, like, for example, let's say Copilot isn't surfacing PDFs. What could be the problem, right? So it's how do we lead people through value in parallel for the scenarios in your environment we know will work, whilst also addressing, let's say, that next highest priority item, let's say it's information search or whatever, in parallel.
I think it'll make a difference now, with the likes of, Copilot going into OneDrive and the files it's now going to be recognizing for Copilot, and the search engine and what it's looking at in terms of file types now through the search engine with Copilot. All those things that are coming into play over the next month might alleviate some of those issues. But I do know that, and I've had the question asked of me, do we wait until we've done the cleanups and the governance and the this and the that and the this and the that, or do we turn it off and then do an iterative approach? And mine is an iterative approach. There are certain things you'll need to have in place for sure, but get started, because it's going to surface stuff and you need a way to be able to report it if it is.
Absolutely. And we see, for example, when we were rolling it out, we'd roll out to the project teams first, get them to be the canary down the mine, look for someone's salary, do whatever you need to do. If you're E5, you can use the data access governance reports and start to see where you might have the highest risk. So there's a lot you can do in prep phase, but ultimately, unless you're actually using it and testing it, how do you even know what people might find out? And even if you do all of that to the nth degree, when you then enable that for, say, HR, they've got a totally different role-based access control that you would have. So you don't even know what they might be able to find.
True,
no matter
things
how
would
much
surface,
project
they
testing
need
you
to.
do. Yeah.
And they need to have it surfaced. So for what they might surface compared to what someone else might would be a little different. And we've had the question, with organisations experienced issues, James is asking, where information that's sensitive is surfaced. Is it, due to that inadequate information management practices? What does that look like to be able to help them on the journey?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of that. Remember that Copilot only has access to what you have access to, but obviously the risk is, but you might have more access than you should have. And so, yes, I've seen it where oversharing became an issue rather than a risk, but it comes down to how are you managing it? So in this pilot group, for example, if you've got it for 300 users during EAP, what are the, let's call it the terms that you're going to put on them as part of, let's say, giving them the license that will get them to actually test to do this, but to do it in an experimental way. So they actually are more or less your pilots doing it out there to find these problems. And that was where we had the best success, is where people didn't just turn it off, because that's typically what got us into this situation. Yep. They used it iteratively to find problems, to feed that back in, so that the governance and the compliance was running in parallel to the pilots and testing, so that you were more or less improving the quality, because it would find duplicate sources. It would reference and cite them, so you could then go and find that. And that internal team were there basically leading the charge, so that, when you then enable, let's say, all of their colleagues, let's say it's someone in HR, you've got the confidence that you've had someone in HR actually through that process validating what they can or can't find, and you're fixing as you go.
Yeah. We've had the question, will enabling Copilot need more storage, the analytics and index data or anything like that?
It depends on what Copilot sources are. So, for example, when EAP started, you had to have everything in the cloud. But to be able to find information, you could enable a graph connector to, say, I don't know, share ServiceNow, or to SharePoint on-prem, or to your network storage drives. There will probably be a little bit of a small license cost there to be able to connect that graph connector and semantically index it. But remember, semantic index is just building on top of search. It's a numerical representation, so it's just numbers, and not necessarily like indexing in the old world the whole of your ServiceNow FAQs, right? But out of the box, no, it doesn't really need more storage.
So I've got here a question. What are your key messages addressing fears of things like losing jobs? And, when you start doing, the communication, when do you start doing it? How early? What does the journey look like around the comms, I suppose, around a pilot program like this?
Sure. From the start, like we, call the elephant out. We knew this was something, even like on our side of the fence too, right? Everyone has the same media influences. So by calling it out, but also by managing it through the surveys. So instead of just saying, how much savings did you have, and then people having the fear of that, it was like, and how did you use that time? What did you do with it?
True. What's on the flip of it? Yeah.
Like how do we overall benefit from this? Highlighting it's not just productivity gains, and although if I'm a CFO, perhaps that's my focus, but think about organizations that also like quant and quant benefits, right? yes, Viva dashboard is great to be able to see where you're getting value or where you might drive more value. But like, I'll use one example of a customer in customer service. So we would run scenario discoveries whereby we would more or less workshop what was working, where people were leading the charge with the communities of practice or the change champions. One scenario was where a person was not a native English speaker, but had really good verbal communication, but not confidence in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Using coaching by Copilot brought so much, let's call it job satisfaction to that individual, because they didn't have to ask their colleagues for help to be able to review something before they sent it. So there's a team benefit there. They then had what if you think about best place to work, I have the tools to do my job. That person will probably never leave any organization that has Copilot. And so it's how do you find those, and then how do you turn those into stories that are shared with the rest of the champions to then take back to their groups? Because one of the other examples I had in one of those scenarios was an individual was talking about complaints and sentiment analysis on the complaints. Took typically 2 weeks, was able to throw it all into Word, and in 10 minutes got the same answers. So instead of spending 2 weeks analyzing, you have the whole month to actually address feedback, improve CSAT, but then taking that and also being able to apply that more broadly. So the same group had some middle managers that had to do a pulse survey, i.e. their internal staff had sent free text feedback that they would have had to do the same thing. They joined the dots on that call that there was another, they could use the sentiment analysis from what they were doing. And all of a sudden they were like, wow, that's a game changer. But if we hadn't have facilitated that, we wouldn't have broken down the organizational silos and shared those key wins. And so key here is that we make it visible, work out loud, help people to see the value in sharing that, to help them kind of see, and how do we apply that to our space?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of, I suppose, from a personal safety perspective coming through with Copilot, even, as you've said, that the language barriers, or just using the microphone to record something, because, typing might not necessarily be their forte, to be able to help them. Has it been hard to move them from the command over to the prompting and understanding prompting? And, what does it look like to build education around that?
Yeah.
Because it is a different mindset. We're often very used to just putting, a couple of words in to get what we want. To have 2,000 characters and write out a whole story, they go, well, I could just type it for that. I've had a lot of people go, oh, why don't I just type it up for 2,000 characters?
Absolutely. And you'll find lots of people, obviously that's the most you can put in. I don't think I've even got over 200. Mm-hmm. And most people will find the sweet spot over time. So like, do I use drafting by Copilot for emails? Not all the time, but when I do need it, it's there. Do I use coaching by Copilot? Not all the time, but really valuable when I need it. So for example, today, I've signed up for a mentoring program with some high school students in Washington, part of Microsoft Corp. And I was very conscious of making sure that this resonated with them when I sent it. So I really wanted to make sure that it was empathetic, it was a clear call to action, and used coaching by Copilot multiple times. Now, I don't use it all the time, but I'm also a native English speaker-ish. And so, it's down to how you will use it and how you will get the most from it. So coming to Word, for example, I've learned over the journey of how to get the right prompt. That's not something that, everyone, I think, will go on their own journey. And you'll find that you may, like, to give you an example, I will run it in Word Online, and then I'll use a slightly different prompt, maybe change the order, tweak around what I'm asking it to do, i.e. I might put the context at the end or put the example at the end, because there's a heavier weighting on what's at the end of a prompt when you use Copilot or prompt engineering or prompt design in general. So having a play with that in different sources, knowing it'll take a few minutes. So I'll go away, make a cup of tea, whatever, and then take the best of each of those and bring them together into a master that will be whatever else n times quicker than if I was to stare at a blank Word document and not know where to start and usually run away to make a coffee. So
yeah, I know some people really struggle with the art of writing, or, you know, I'm great when it comes to speaking, but blogging is not necessarily my forte. I'm very formal. I'm not very good at actually in my writing being a little bit more casual. So I'm finding that, you know, for even me, Copilot allows me to shift over into some of the more casual type wording instead of being this, you know, hard formal or being too clipped. And the fact that even in Outlook, it gives you kind of that coaching has really helped. Have you seen any other use cases where, you know, with individuals it really resonated and it flipped that real non-user, you know, it's just like, absolutely, I'm not using this, and you've managed to kind of flip them over the hardcore resistor?
Yeah, well, I had someone in comms, and I think comms is a great space for value of Copilot. So they were a bit resistant, probably fear of their role, because, you know, if you have a big team of people drafting and then you've got Copilot, you can see why. But what they were able to do when we were trying to capture the benefits for them was, in the past, they were always time poor, you know, so they'd be able to communicate, say, via email, or it might have been a Viva Engage post internally. But what they were able to do by using Copilot was take it and be able to go omni-channel, which is what they knew the latest generation actually want to be able to consume any information. And so being able to do that, although there was not a productivity benefit, there was actually a reach benefit, there was an impact benefit, there was actually a lot more successful campaigns. So the metric won't be actually productivity for the individual, it's actually impact of campaigns related to what they were doing.
Right. And measuring that.
And so that was a game changer for them in terms of, wow, not just kind of how can I spend less time doing my job, but actually that's now given us a way to reach all of our staff the way we knew they wanted to be communicated with, that we could never do in the time we had available to do our jobs.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. I know we're not necessarily sitting in that more sort of technical space in this discussion, but you know, it is, I'm sure, going to come up for sort of many around, you know, the roadmap around Copilot services locally in Australia. You know, that we have a hard requirement, you know, regulatory around data sovereignty, which means it's a bit of a non-starter for some. You know, are there any, you know, plans around that roadmap, and, you know, will Copilot honour the security permissions that are in place that, you know, surfaces for a user? So there's those two questions. So there's two security questions around data sovereignty and security permissions.
Yeah, the security one's very quick. It basically inherits the security models that you have in place. So I only can get access to what a Copilot can only get access to what I have access to. So that, and you also have, you know, all of the purview and everything else to be able to see and manage the service from an admin perspective, understand from any discovery perspective what people are doing. So that,
should we be purchasing purview?
I'm not in sales.
Yep.
I'm sure there's plenty of solutions out there, but obviously Purview is integrated into Microsoft Stack, so it's better together, or it's easier, less to manage, but I don't know in that space. I'll leave that for you to talk to your security specialist. But
so the regulatory side of things. For
so that is something
services?
Jacob, I think, posted. Jacob, definitely speak to your Microsoft account team, because your organization is certainly not alone in having that requirement. And I don't know what else I can say on this call without people signing the NDA. So I will leave it there, but do talk to your account team, because there is definitely traction in that space. Yeah.
Right. I think we've covered off most of the questions throughout there. Any other core key, you know, final points that you might actually have on your lessons learned? And I know that you have a slide there that you might want to
quickly, I'll just bring it. Yeah, sure. I think So I did have another slide, but I thought instead I'd share something for you that you can take away with you to help with your own plan. And so the key, obviously, is understanding how this fits within your, I don't know, your organization or your AI framework, or how you're managing this, i.e., coming back to my point previously, good governance needs to be in place to lead to strong adoption that will drive business value. And the longer you've adoption, the more business value will be generated, because people can easily tie the two together, which will feed into your business case. But for us as the change team, you know, understanding your personas and roles, if you don't already have it, then great time to start to do it. And of course, use Copilot to help you. How are you then going to measure it? We can also help you with some of that, you know, surveys, qual and quant would be really important. And we also covered off some of those things that you might need to consider at how you manage human feedback in the way that you write your questions. So being conscious of the challenges in that space. And also, as I said, having those focus groups to be able to get multiple cross-functional teams together, or your community of practice or change champions, whichever way you're working it, to be able to have those conversations. Think about, at the end though, not just return on investment from an ROI, traditional kind of cost takeout perspective, but what I covered off, you know, that return on personas, return on experience, or on functional areas. So when rolling this out, like consider licensing in individuals in HR, but then licensing everyone in HR or in that division, to watch how you can also get exponential benefits when you have a full function or a department, or hopefully then the whole organization using Copilot.
Yeah, then sometimes there's not personas that there's personas that don't necessarily need it if all they're doing is accessing Outlook on a license they've got an Exchange, and that's it. That's all they're going to be doing, and they very rarely live in their Outlook. You probably won't look at Copilot for them, for example.
Look, you will definitely get more value the more you use, and
Yes.
the more data you have in the cloud. Absolutely. Yeah, I think start where you can see the most value, and then over time, bear in mind that the product roadmap is accelerating so quickly.
Oh, it is. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, for example, I think I can talk about this. You're going to have something called Sound Like Me. So it'll look at your sent items. It'll look at your way that you write and actually make the tone of the email sound like you. So although right now, say you may not want to use it, you may not see the value for your frontline using this because that's all they use. But then if they have that capability, and then they can also use coaching, and typically they are probably the most, I'm generalizing, but typically the most limited in terms of English as a first language, or at their education level. So think about your CSAT and your NPS from your customer perspective to then feedback in. And I'll leave with that point, which is, if we're just talking cost, it's a hard conversation. It has to be about value. It has to be about building it as a business and a business case for this, because that's where the real benefits are that you probably won't be able to unearth until you've actually kind of gone through the journey with all parts of the business.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks very much, Adam. I'll let you have a bit of a read maybe through the chat. So there's some great sort of comments or experiences of others that have been on the call that have gone on the Copilot journey, and their kind of feedback. I think I've covered off all the questions. Please feel free to surface it again if you like. I know Adam's got a bit of a hard stop to be able to get going as well, but he'll maybe spend a moment just having a bit of a read through. Okay, thank you so much, Adam. Appreciate you coming in and sharing some of those insights. I know that it's a big topic. So, but of course we are an adoption user group, so I really want to focus on the user side of the journey. So always very important. And if you want the more technical, there are other groups out there that are focused on the more technical, should you need to. So thanks very much for that. Okay, let's get in and underway. I have put out my new Wheel of Fortune, as everyone likes to call it. It is now available. I do have a folder where I always put the latest version. This is version number 40. It is now out there. This is done all in PowerPoint, by the way, with lots of layering, and I use charting and all sorts of things to be able to build it out. Always have a lot of fun doing it. And if you haven't seen it, go up on LinkedIn and Twitter with a gazillion shares, and it's always interesting where it ends up globally. So that's now live and online, but feel free to grab a copy. You can download a high-res copy. Copilot, there is some really great information that's actually out there. Axiom got me in to do a webinar for them. So it was that, demos, what can you do, costing. So I ran the webinar. That is available. It's on my YouTube channel if you wanted to have a look. So the YouTube channel is aka.ms. You can do your /M365 adoption. So you'll find it on YouTube or at Microsoft 365 adoption. There are a whole heap more videos gone up on Collab Talk answering questions, and there'll be more to come. Always go in, maybe have a look at the release notes on the Microsoft adoption page. A lot of what I'm about to talk about is on there, but there's lots of other things that they don't put up there that I will flow through on. The latest champions call was focused on the world of mesh. The next call is up on March 26th, which is 27th for us. It's usually at early hours of the morning. Okay. Thanks, Lynn. You enjoyed the Axiom session. Great to hear. So embarking on the Microsoft Teams Premium adoption journey, there is a really great a blog that's been poured out around the adoption journey, of which there's some pictures and where you can go to get further content around adoption if you want to read that blog around Teams Premium. There has just recently been in the community events, the teams have actually held a whole Microsoft Copilot series. It was like a 48-hour conference that was actually run purely on Copilot with a lot of really great video content. Highly recommend going in and having a watch. Most of them only went for about sort of 30 to 45 minutes if you want to sort of work your way through some various topics, but some good content there and content that you might want to put into your own learning platforms, even for your business units. Now, the Modern Work Customer Hub has come into play. This is for that whole sort of AI Copilot component where it's got content in there. Those same webinars that I just put up the page before are on this page as well. It's come together into one hub to be able to help you around training. So a good one to have in there. There is some customer training that's actually coming up that you can register for. One, that just plain discover, 2, driver user enablement, and then succeeding in organization transfer. So you can register for these sessions. Yes, they're all in the US timeframe. So you would potentially have to be up during the middle of the night if you're hardcore and you want to watch them, but some good content there. One of the Work Lab newsletters that came out is how businesses are using Copilot right now. And you'll see over here, and it's got some of the cases around why it's actually been used, how it was used, what it saved them in time. And one of them was that the average respondents was saving themselves 2 to 3 hours a week. I can absolutely see it. But as Adam just said, that rather than the fear of maybe I'll lose my job, it's like, well, often we're overworked anyway. We're spending too much time doing sedentary, or administrative type sort of things, and there might be better ways. So, yeah, interesting information there. So this was the agenda for the Copilot Tech Accelerator that was out there. So you can always go to the page. It will also lead you to the recording. Microsoft Copilot, so Copilot for Microsoft 365, I should say, the change of name. It has its own blog community now that you can go to, so all the blogs are grouped together. Fast Track, there's a newsletter that's gone out around how Fast Track can help you to get ready if you need that support. There is a community now where you can go in and you can post and find information for small and medium businesses. Oh, by the way, there's also a community call on March 26th. So if you're in that SMB space, whether you be a partner or a customer, you could join on that call for an Ask Me Anything question session. Now, a big one, Viva Topics is retiring. It's a little sad, especially for those that, have invested quite a bit of time in terms of building out Viva Topics. There are some real changes coming to this space, so you might want to have a read around what's actually happening and some of the questions around it. So if you're looking at it or you're building it, I would maybe pivot away from that and have a look. Microsoft have put up a new knowledge management site around it to be able to help and support you on the journey around what it's going to look like now with the sort of advent of Copilot and some of the other core ways of working. Then we're seeing a real shift. So it's now dropping off. There is a PDF playbook around knowledge and learning solutions. This is just one of the screenshots from there, but some really good content in there around KM. So go and have a read and a look, and it will help you to look at how you might be able to pivot if you are using Viva Topics. There is now an AI learning hub on Microsoft Learn to be able to get yourself skilled up and ready. Some really great content on there. So a couple of them are using AI every, so the workday, adopting Copilot. There's understanding and getting to know the different experience prompts and generative AI. And so underneath that is, of course, core modules you can work your way through on Microsoft Learn so you can help skill yourself up if you need to. Microsoft Copilot and Personal, there's a great blog that's actually come out around understanding the difference between the two, because you've got the consumer side, it's $20 a month on the consumer side for Personal, and then you get the work side at $30 US a month. And of course that always comes down to your who you're working with and your partners and licensing, and it can change around on the work side of things. So, but on the personal side, you can take it up on the a cost that drops into your 365 environment, or you've got just the free, Chat GPT or, through Bing. There are some great demos. If you're going in, there's now the M365 filter that will then focus on sort of the SharePoint. There's a 365 archive and backup. So some new demos. These are physical click-through demos that I recommend. Okay. Jessica, the presentation is available in a link. It's pinned in chat up the very top where it's got a pin. You'll be able to see it. It's available for all. And we'll put the links back up again at the end for you. There are some custom background galleries now for Microsoft Teams that are around Copilot. Another one that's gone up is Xbox just recently. I do like some of the Copilot backgrounds if you want to put them behind you. There is a PowerPoint that has gone live around Viva for AI transformation. So it's Copilot and the AI side in the Viva suite and what it's actually doing. I do like the PowerPoint. Go in, download it. It's got some really good content in there. Glint has an Ask the Expert session and AMA coming up. They do run sort of regular sessions. The next one's coming up on March 12, which will be 13th at all hours of the morning. Okay. There was a webinar recently in terms of Viva Engage. I really enjoyed it. I do love the Viva Engage team and the community that we've got globally. There were lots of MVPs on there. It's got the analytics side. There's a roadmap in here around what's actually coming on the analytics side. So it was a deep dive on the analytics. Great for us as, if you're in the adoption space, because it's not just about going in and having the product. It's about, well, what are they doing with the product? How can we lift the adoption and being able to measure both before and after? Viva Engage has got an answers webinar that's actually coming up on the 20th. So there's lots of sort of Ask Me Anything webinars out there, guys, but it does have an APAC session. We're very lucky to have, Angus Florence here locally in Australia. So he does like to have an Aussie session time. So one for us, a win. Yay. So if you want to get on that webinar, please go in and register. Viva Engage actually has a blog that came out around best practice for engaging employees when you're doing the Ask Me Anythings or live events. How can you set up? What does it look like? Best practice. So go and have a read of that. I like it. There's the new Microsoft Planner adoption site that's now plugged into the adoption.microsoft.com. So if you're not familiar with the new planner, I would highly recommend getting yourself around it, because there's lots of changes that are actually coming down the line, and the plug-in sort of with Microsoft Project right through to Loop and To Do, and, you know, some of the interconnectivities that are going on between it all. There was on YouTube, so John Moore has actually put up a list busters. So if you want to get into, have a look and a watch of the recording, there's some practical uses and use cases that I think that you might like when it comes to Microsoft lists that could help you out if you wanted to jump to it. It's at around 12:30 minutes in. Teams Nation was recently conducted. If you had registered, you did have a period of time to be able to go watch the recordings, or you can go and pay to watch some of the recordings from all of those session tracks. Some great information there. The Insider blog. If you don't ever go and have a look, I love going in and seeing what the insider track. You might not have the insider track inside your business, so you get to play around with features and functionalities first and foremost, but go and have a look at what's actually coming. There's some cool content in there, and I will be talking about some of this along the way. So what's new and coming to 365? Okay, so we've done the adoption. Let's see how we go tracking our way through some of it. The apps launcher. If you have training content, PowerPoints or guides you've created, yes, the app launcher is changing again. So the experience is going to be swapping out in your tenant. It will be coming between March to June. The document section that's down the bottom, the recently access, is going to be removed, and it's going to flow over into a create type scenario instead. They found that it wasn't actually utilized very much, so that's going to be swapped out. So there is a bit of a change coming, guys. There are new content source filters across all AI verticals when it comes to Microsoft Search. This is going to be able to help us an awful lot in terms of what it will draw into search. It's now got things from Power BI, Viva Learning, and other third-party sources if you've got it indexed through the Microsoft Graph connector to be able to draw it into search. The great part about that is if we can search it and it will come up, then of course it's going to flow over into things like Copilot. Yep. Okay. If you've got the license. Introducing the new Copilot experience in Teams. So now we're getting into sort of what's new for Teams. We've got Copilot. It has come over into chat. So that chat experience, or the overarching Copilot that you saw in 365 when you logged in, has now flown over into Teams chat. You can also go into your ellipsis button over here on the left-hand side and go get Copilot and have it over on the left rail, so running down here as well as in chat. So that is an overarching right across sort of 365 when you're asking for questions. So that there, and our Copilot capabilities are now over in Windows on the desktop. So in the bottom at the moment, for me, it's in the bottom right-hand corner. It's in preview mode. You'll see here it's kind of got the icon here, but it's actually moved for me in Windows 11 over to here. Okay, so it's had a bit of a change. You can use Copilot. The great part about this that I loved recently was there was a real difference between putting it into Word, something like how do I take a screenshot, for example, and it would list out how to do, you know, print screen. But when I did it in Windows, because Snipping Tool is part of Windows as an application, it kicked off the actual Snipping Tool for you. So where you ask makes a difference. So having it embedded in to our Windows environment, rather cool. I mean, there's lots of other things that you could do, but one of the ways. The what's new to Copilot, we've got the Help Me Create now. So you'll see the Help Me Create. That's a new kind of prompt and way to be able to work across the web app. Copilot Academy has now driven into Viva Learning. The admin can disable it in the Academy if they aren't using it or don't want it, for example, but I do like the fact that it's actually being surfaced for Viva Learning users to be able to learn, so it's now being embedded in. What else is new to Copilot? There's so much stuff in the Copilot space. It is moving hard and fast. But the main ones that I particularly liked was around Copilot Informs. The fact that it's now going to drive down into Outlook Classic, so then you're not quite forced to use Outlook New. So that one's coming. The other ones, we'll touch on is over in OneDrive and the mobile app. So it's available flowing through into your mobile app. There is a Copilot available, so you can actually use it in the on your phone. You'll also find it embedded into lots of the applications on your phone now. One of the things that's come into play is there are date dividers, because we found that it was a little confusing as to when it was. So those date dividers, it took me a moment to kind of click as to what it was from one picture to the other, going, what's changed? But it's actually putting, was it on Monday, Tuesday, for example, because we often are putting lots of prompts in. It was like, when was it? It's also then flowing through into your OneDrive. So this one is a big one that's been waited on, and I'm sure that for that pilot, the early access side of things, that this will have made a difference for those guys. If hopefully, it's a pity they didn't have it a while ago. But the way that we can get our information, and the way that it draws on files and helping us with file summaries when we're sharing, for example, and using that natural language flowing over into Copilot. So for, example, when you're getting in, you can then start to go, what do you want to find? What do you want to ask? What do you want to summarize? So they're the three core components for you to be able to go in and ask questions. Move on. If you're wanting to know, well, what could you actually ask? For example, I've put some of the prompts in here from the What's New Copilot blog that's gone out. So you can come back and you can have a look at it. There is also the ability now to get quick summaries as part of your sharing. So it gives you this quick summary, and that quick summary then flows in as part of the invite. So when it comes over into Outlook, it will give you a bit of a summary on the document as part of your Copilot environment. And Copilot now will work with the following files. Yay, we talked about PDF and some of those issues a little earlier with Adam. So, and I've put in a couple of other links for you to help and support you on that. You'll also have in Stream it flowing in now to be able to help you get instant video summaries, and be able to locate and ask questions and sentiment, and all that will flow through now into Stream. Draft and coaching into the Classic Outlook. We've seen it in New, coming to Classic now. Yay. I'm really excited about that one. All right. In Teams, we've got that new Copilot experience, and we've got the ability to be able to see things like your Copilot chat history, all those prompts, and also being able to go into the lab. We've touched on that one. Okay. There is a prompt like a pro blog where it's got some great information around things that you could highlight or do. Copilot is now flowing through into those usage reports in the admin center for you to be able to work on as specialists. One, keeping an eye out on it. What is it looking like by app as well? If you actually purchased the Viva Insights side of things, it goes a whole lot further. It will go into what type of questions are being cast across the application, so you could then work on, better education, for example. So it depends on how far you want to go as to what kind of reporting you're going to get when it comes to the likes of Copilot. You've got the ability to be able to share prompts with colleagues. So, like in this one, being able to put things, and it can then integrate into your Copilot Lab site experience rolling out in summer. The Copilot Lab. Now, just so that you're aware, there's a lot of changes to where things are sitting right across the whole suite. You're going to see name changes. So if you've got documentation around, the link and what the link likes to get to it, the cloud.microsoft is going to be flowing through across everything. Okay, so keep an eye out as it starts to switch out those, the domain naming is all changing. Okay, just be aware of that you'll have the name.cloud.microsoft. So it might cause some issues here and there. There is, as part of your Copilot lab, if you go online, there's some really great content in there. You can then go and have a look through Copilot, all the different prompts, what you're going to see. So do like it. There is a downloadable PDF that you can put out there in the business to be able to help and support of how to. I've put in a whole heap more around different places I found with good prompting for you. Copilot is flowing into form creation to be able to help and support you. I do like the ability in here to ensure that you're getting good quality and a better accuracy. Sometimes we may not necessarily be asking the right questions, or we've got leading questions. So Copilot will help you to generate that draft. It'll help you on themes. It will help around, further instructions to fine tune. So go and have a look. I won't play the video. It is embedded into the presentation for you if you wanted to watch it. Now, in the What's New to Teams, I found that a lot of what was in there we've touched on over the last sort of 2 sessions. So if you wanted to go back in and see what's there, it's got it all listed out. I often don't go and drive into things like collaborative apps and frontline solutions and a few other components if you wanted to read it. You can personalize group chats with avatars in Microsoft Teams. So that's coming into play, built-in images and emojis. There are updated labels for external participants. So these updated labels is there to increase security. So what's come into play now is the term unverified. We're fairly used to having external party, but we haven't really had that unverified before. So those that are not part of the organization's trusted relationship now comes in as an unverified label. Okay. This one will be a bit of an education piece for our users, because you might want to double check and make sure, well, who are they when you're in the call? Trust around that sort of security piece. Hang on, who are they? Make sure that you ask the questions and double check, and you might need to kick them out of the meeting. There is the ability to have that collaborative stage view where you can open the links of particular APIs in other windows. Okay, so that's then flowing through. Microsoft Teams is allowing the one sort of stage at to be in now, whether you're work or on the consumer personal accounts. So you can come in and add another account and have both your personal and your business that you can do as part of this drop down when you choose where you want to go. So it's now coming into one single desktop environment. So please note that Teams Free is not going to be removed for users, though, that if they're in Windows 10 and Mac. However, if you have Teams Free and you're on Windows 11, it will be removing the personal and moving you over into the more business view. So it's going to remove it and swap it out. Just take note. Coming to Teams is the use of our Apple AirPods to be able to mute and unmute yourself, and on those Mac. So on the Mac, if you're using Apple AirPods. Okay. There are video settings that are coming into play in terms of screen sharing, some manual options that are going to be there to be able to reduce things like lag and improve some quality in Teams. You do have this sort of auto detection, but if it's failing, you can come in and play around with it yourself. So that's coming into play. In our town halls, organizations, organizers and presenters, and those that we've brought in for external presenters, you're now going to be able to have private discussions. So you're going to have chat that you can do both before, during, and after virtual events. I particularly like this because often we need to communicate and we don't want to be putting it into sort of group chat. So how do we communicate can be a real struggle. So this one's a really good one. I'm very pleased it's come out finally. We can change the background now while recording on our phone. So iOS devices, we can now fix that. Meeting recap is going to be done automatically for you and shared in the chat after the meeting. So this is with the users that have actually got access to Intelligent Recap. So that's all kind of that, licensing side of things. So it depends on what you've actually got. But part of Teams Premium, it's now going to come up automatically for you. You don't necessarily have to be sort of generating. The what's new to SharePoint, a lot of what we have in here I've either discussed or it's scattered now throughout, or we've talked about it previously. But the one core thing is custom SharePoint document library templates that can be created and put into one of two locations. So these are your sort of locations here, and your document library here to be able to draw from. I've put in how to and links for you. The SharePoint menu on your app bar helps. It's written right there in my own head. When you select the create button, it now gives you lots of what do you want to create. Now, we've had a lot of this before, but we've now got in here things like sites, lists, on top of our general app. So we've got news, we've got pages. Okay, so new components coming into play as part of the app bar. It's great. We've got applied filters for Microsoft lists. We can now see them easily up in the upper left above, so we can put them on and take them off easily. Lists has a new forms experience. This one in particular I do really like. So you can create a form off the back of your list to be able to send out to your users to be able to capture information. So I'm liking this one. This one in particular is a good fun one to be able to play around with. You might use it for things such as, recruitment tracking or managing orders, customer issues. Maybe they got to fill in expenses and it then drops into Microsoft Lists in the back end. Nice. You can discover planner boards now with your Microsoft Loop. So directly in there, if you type your // backslash, I have to think about that one, and then put in PL, it will search your apps to grab Planner to be able to bring in Planner into Loop. So that new Planner app, when it comes to Planner, it is flowing out and coming soon. From late March through to early May, that integrated sort of single workspace is coming into play to simplify Microsoft To-Do Planner project under one banner, so that it will help and support you when it comes to your task management. So there is a bit of a change. It will change over to the Planner app where, used to have tasks by Planner and To-Do was what it was previously. It's now swapping over. There is the ability with Planner to have task publishing. Now you can schedule recurring lists and what is those top requests. So that means that we can have it and go out and go, I want to do a list recurring on the 15th day of every month, for example. Not necessarily the 15th, but on day 15. So I do like this. We've had that in the likes of Outlook for recurrences. It's flowing through. Microsoft To Do, there is a grid view that's come into play when it comes to the web version and inside Microsoft Outlook. When it comes to Clipchamp, there is now automatic captions coming into play. Once they've loaded, it then will appear in the transcript in your properties panel to be able to support you as part of that. Answers in Viva is available now for all of those that have the Microsoft Viva suite, as well as the Employee Communications and Communities license. So if you have those two licenses, admin can also request a trial if you want to try out those capabilities. I do like the fact that Answers has really flown through into Viva Engage. This means that you can, come in and now then use it across Copilot to go and find out, what are the best answers for this particular topic And it will also flow through now into search for your business. There is updates to conversation analytics. Those conversation analytics for Viva Engage includes the new features, real-time updates, reactions, time period filters, all sorts of stuff. So if you watch that webinar that I put right back at the beginning around adoption, it will go through a lot of these analytics. So if you want to see it, go watch the video, a good one there for you. There are new options in Viva Engage to close the polls. Hallelujah. So they don't sit there in perpetuity. So you can close them and reopen. Once it's closed, of course, your end users then can't fill in that poll. The Yammer rebranding to Viva Engage domain. If you still have Yammer actually in there, then you'll find that it's actually changing over in your mail. So this is the mail. There's also the domain name changing, but the mail is swapping over to engage.mail.microsoft when it comes out. Okay. SharePoint, the latest sort of pit stop, it talks about measuring of Copilot, what that looks like. Go in, have a look at it in terms of the dashboard. We've talked a little bit about that before, but I'd have a read of that. There's also those Viva Insights digests being paused. So if you're very used to reading those digests around, how did you split your time across meetings, for example, quiet time, it's going to be paused for a little bit to adjust based on some of the feedback, and it will come back around again soon. Okay. Viva Pulse has changed over to cloud.microsoft.com. In Viva Pulse, it's now embedding in the automatic employee survey, because it's all about surveys for managers around your team or projects, for example. One of them that's come in is around Copilot. So you can actually go in and fill in. I am well informed around Copilot. It's automatically in there in Viva Pulse if you have the license for it, so that you can start to look at how they're feeling around it, and are they working with it? What does it look like? Okay. There's a lot of great questions in there, so you can just build an automatic survey. The Viva Glint newsletter, I'm not going to dive in. There are a few new features and programs. Go to the Ask Me Anything session that we talked about earlier, and it will also go through a lot of this content. Viva Bookings has a new homepage. If you use Viva Bookings, it's kind of collating information together a little bit more for you to be able to support you on your journey, create a particular meeting type. So that has adjusted if you use Bookings. The hybrid meeting experience in Outlook, we have been waiting on some of this. It was there for a little while. It then had a bit of a change. So now when you go in, it's got the in-person event. How are you going to turn up? Yes, person, virtually. It's in a drop down. So end users may need to be taught to click on the drop down. They might just be used to clicking yes or no, but there is a drop down. And then in the tracking, if they want to then get ready to make sure that they're ready for that meeting and have maybe a meeting room booked, to go and then double check. Are they going to physically be rocking up in person or not? Are you all going to sit at your own desks scattered throughout the office, for example, or get a meeting room? Chat in Teams for the new Outlook for Windows. So this is your Outlook Monarch. It's got the chat with your participants. It will bring up a window for you to chat directly, either before, during, after. So if you're going into your Outlook calendar, you'll be able to kick off chat inside Outlook. Conditional formatting is now coming for the new Outlook and on the web. I'm particularly excited about the web version and having conditional formatting across there. That one is one that's been asked for a really long time. So, for example, every time your manager, for example, emails you, you want it to be in bold, red, and 14 point, where everything else might be in 11 or 12 point, for example. So that's now flowing into our online environment. There is the new sync feature coming to the web as well as the Monarch version of Outlook to be able to do the kind of the force sync of your mail if it's having any particular issues. So it's like that kicking it off to go refresh. So you don't have to refresh the page like with F5 on your browser. If it's having some problems, you can just click on sync. The Outlook on your iOS is having an update to its settings. So if you have screenshots in training, you're going to need to change them. It has had a bit of an update to be able to move things around a little. So I've put a, what kind of content has moved so that you know. I liked this one, checklists. Yay, really quick and easy. So if you're in the online version of Word, you can actually just go Control, comma, and it turns it into a checklist box for you to start typing. If you have a list already there, you can highlight the list so you can select it. Okay, so once you've selected, then you can do the Control, comma, and it will convert it over to a checkbox list for you in our online. I like it. Okay, Control Alt Enter. Okay, Excel, what's new? There is the chart data task pane has come into play. So over on the right hand side, it gives us a quick and easy task pane to be able to work with, doing formulas, functionality, and setting up. So that's a cool one. You've also got images and data types in your pivot tables. In the past, it had some real issues in regards to bringing images in. Now, when you do your images and you do a link to where you got your image, wherever that happens to be, in a pivot table, instead of giving you words, it will now drop those pictures in for you properly. So I'm really liking that. Okay. In Viva, if you have a license plan 1 or 2, you'll now get containers to be able to contain things in the web, to be able to move them around easily and structurally group them. So yay, finally. Now, if you're a bit of a Viva user, like I am, Visio user, then these things come into play. Yes, Stephen, the slides are absolutely available. What's retiring? Yet again, I've kept it in here. Stream Classic is retiring in about a month. So if you haven't migrated, they will be deleted. You need to get your videos over now, okay? So really important, if you haven't done it, get it over. There is a retirement of the post by email and reply by email when it comes to Viva Engage. So we're used to reply directly to a post in email. It's changing over to the interactive emails to give you a bit of a different way that you're reacting, you're working with it. So there's a bit of a swap out in how you're working. So you used to have an email address and you put the email address and the email would email into Viva Engage. If that helps. Now it works just a little bit differently. Now this one I was a bit, oh, really? Mind you, I haven't really used Publisher very much, but I'm very much not surprised that Publisher will no longer be supported after October 2026. Going. We now have Clipchamp, we now have a designer, for example. So you've got your Microsoft Designer. So I'm not surprised that that actual application of Publisher is going. There's no real action at this point. If you had the standalone version of Publisher, then, of course, you can continue, but that will end on October 26th. I always go in, have a look at what the release notes are. At the moment, it's mainly just we fixed issues. There was no sort of what's new. It's mainly fixing issues. There is all the events catalog. We've talked about this one last month. Go in, have a look. What are the things that you can actually join to do some learning around? There is a lot that's actually in Australian time zone. If you want to learn about Copilot, for example, go and have a look. The M365 conference that's actually coming up over in the US. Good luck if you're actually going. I won't be going. I've got the MVP Summit at the moment. That's a little later. I've got too many other things happening to be there, but a great conference. There are lots of great community day events if you wanted to join. Some of them are virtual, some of them are in person, all over the world. The Digital Workplace Conference in New Zealand has just happened. Hopefully, some of you got to go. The Australian Digital Workplace Conference has not been announced yet. I will keep you up to date when it is announced. Don't forget that the SharePoint Internet Festival is on the 22nd of May, and Swoop will be coming in to present at the user group in June the results. The Workplace Ninja session is it's a full day sort of conference being held in person at Microsoft at 1 Denniston Street. So feel free to go to that. It is more in the technical space. There's lots of great content. Where do I find all my content? All in there and available. I've swapped out, put 2024 in. I've only got the last couple of years. I might even drop off 2021. Up to you whether you want it still in there. We will be coming back around in April 2nd. I will advise who the speaker will actually be very soon. It will go live. Generally, I put it live around about sort of up to 2 weeks beforehand. If you have any topics that you would like to hear about, then please feel free to ask, can we have a particular topic like this? Put it into chat. I'm more than happy to have suggestions. If there are any thoughts, questions, or comments, please feel free to type them into chat. Hopefully you've enjoyed the session. I will go in, I will drop in for you where you're going to find today's presentation again. I'll just drop it into chat. Hey. There we go. So those are here for you so that you can find them again. Hopefully, that gives you a bit of an idea of what's going on. There's so much happening across the space. It is speeding up exponentially. More content. I know it's going really fast and I'm trying to take on it. I could, if you wanted to, reduce it right down and just go, these are my top 20 topics if you like, but then you really wouldn't understand sometimes the things that your end users might need to be across. I need some sleep now after a very, very long night and a couple of days putting it together. Who needs sleep, right? It's overrated. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming in and staying through to the very end. Hopefully you enjoyed Adam's presentation, and thank you, Adam. I really do appreciate it. Topic on Syntax. So that's actually SharePoint Premium is what you're sort of looking at there. More than welcome to have any conversations, chats. Feel free to come off mute. You can raise your hand if you need to. Thank you for joining it again. As I said, I will try and get this content up ASAP. I'm under the pump to get out to Seattle on the weekend, and I'll send you some photos. We'll have a look at some photos when I get back next month. Thank you for joining, and I'll turn off recording now.